shortcuts a lot, otherwise known as SCAL. Now the reason I'm doing this is because I haven't done any new SCAL tutorials for a very long time, and there are a lot of people who haven't seen any of my shortcuts a lot tutorials, and lots of new people that actually want them. When you open up Shortcuts a lot, this is what you are going to see. For the most part, it's going to be something like this. There will be variations because it depends on how you've got your program set up. So this one is going to be dealing with the basics and preferences, and I'm going to try and keep it as short as humanly possible. So on the top here we have various controls which are pretty much self-explanatory. The one that you're going to need to set up first of all, however, is your cutter. And if you click on this, you can see that I've got mine set up with the professional here, which is what I used to cut with, and that was my silver bullet double head job. But when you want to set up your cutter to start with, you go right up to the very top, and you've got the Shortcuts Lot 5 Pro, and you carry along here and you go to the cutter. You click on that and you go to My Cutter and Manage Cutters. And this is where you get a whole list of cutters. There are many more than this. And you can choose your brand and your type of cutter. Now with some types of cutter, like the Brother Scan and Cut that I have currently, you cannot actually connect directly to the cutter. It's not because SCAL couldn't do it, it's because Brother won't let them. But if you've got another different sort of cutter, then Shortcuts a lot will be capable of controlling your machine. So if you're thinking of buying Shortcuts a lot, go onto their website, have a look, see which machines it will connect to and which ones it won't. And pretty much all machines that I've come across can use Shortcuts a lot in one way or another. So we've got these here, which is sort of cut, copy, paste, all that sort of thing, importing, tracing, the library. The library is useful. It's got a load of shapes in it. And it's also where you keep your projects if you store your projects within the software itself. Left side here, we've got a load of flyouts. But when you hover over a flyout, you'll find that it gives you information on what it is. Like this is the eraser. This one here is the drawing tool. This one here is the cut or crop, etc., etc. So take the time and just have a look and see what these tools are. Now on the right hand side, you've got a whole list of menus. Now one that you're going to be very keen on learning how to use, and it's very simple, is the document menu, which is how to set up your mat size for cutting and various other preferences that you might like. Now you notice I've got mine on A4. If I click on here, you can actually put in a custom mat size. Some mat sizes are in it already, but you can click on a custom one and you can fill in some details and get that sorted with whatever size mat you so choose. I advise keeping your mat size to your paper size. Now the reason for this is pretty simple. If you've got a larger mat size and then you use a smaller paper size, what you've got on your mat won't necessarily fit on what's going to fit on your paper. It's as simple as that. It just makes it so much easier for you. And you can also, in most cases, use what's called as what you see is what you get, which means that whatever you draw on here goes in exactly the same position on your mat. Okay, that's what that one particular thing means. But the first thing that you need to do when you're altering your settings in Shortcuts a lot, and what this doesn't make any difference whether it's the Pro version or the other version, look at your preferences. Now most of these are pretty self-explanatory. So you've got remember the last mat size, auto scale the mat to fit the window, which means this will always fit in the window unless you do something else with it. Keep the mat visible, or you could have it so that you don't see the mat, but presumably you probably want to see it. The automatically switch property tabs based on current selection. I really don't bother with that. Warn me about too many fonts installed. Now I've got it ticked, but I've got a load of fonts and it hasn't warned me about any of it yet. Embed images in project files. So you want images of something on your project file so that when you have a little thumbnail, you see what you're looking at. And show menu font sample, well, that's pretty self-explanatory. So that's under the general. Now the next one we have is the editing. Constrain angles. If you are doing something like straight lines and things of that nature and you want to constrain it to a certain angle, you can have it do that, but you need to tell it what angle you want it to constrain at. And these are, well, this is, I think, what was originally set. I don't think I've ever altered it. Now, the nudge, I've got mine because I'm using metric, I've got mine in centimeters, and I've got it at basically a millimeter. If I am using the software and I use, and I'll show you them in a minute, use the nudge tools in there, it will move things by a millimeter at a time. Arrow key is the arrow keys on my keyboard on my computer, and I've got that at 2 millimeters. The one which you might find is already checked and you want to uncheck it is to keep objects on mat when dragging. Because if you're designing something on here and you suddenly think, oh, I want to move that out of the way, it won't let you move it. Default shadow size, again, I've got mine set to a millimeter. You can alter it if you want a larger shadow on something, not a problem. Automatically simplify shape, simplify threshold. I've not altered this, and simplification is simply taking out extra nodes that don't really need to be there. And never fill open paths. Sometimes it's very important to know that your path is closed. And if you are using a color fill, if you have that checked, you will not be able to put a color on an open path. If your circle, for example, is not quite closed, it won't put the color in. And it's a very good way of making sure that you realize that you have an open path. Because sometimes if you want to put one object on top of another and join them up, if you have an open path, it won't do it. So that's an important thing to be able to ascertain, and it's an easy way of knowing that your path is closed. If it's got a color fill, it's closed. End of story. And then you have the store where you can go in and you can buy designs. I've never gone into it. I've never looked at anything in the store at all. And so I would then click OK, and you are pretty much set to go. Right, so on here we have our document. Pretty obvious. You can have a grid or not as you want, and you can alter the size of the grid. I don't like to see the grid. I find it distracting. You can have it on showing outlines only. You can show print margins, for example, registration marks, if indeed you had anything on there to have registration marks for. Page color, you can change this surface color if you so wish. I'm going to just click that off. So that is basically your mat stuff. Then you've got your positioning and sizing of things. These are the little arrows that I mentioned earlier. These are the nudge arrows. So if you want something moved on your mat, it will nudge it in whichever direction you choose. These are your alignment tools for aligning objects, and you can either align to selection or you can align to page. Up to you. Keeping proportions on your sizes, rotation buttons, and flipping, so from left to right and up to down, that sort of stuff. We have our color chart here. So we have our fill color, our stroke color. The opacity is pretty obvious. You have these alterations that you can make to the mitre of joints. I generally don't bother to alter them, and you can change the end caps on your lines. Now, line styles, there are a lot of them, and you can put your own in by using the edit. You can add your own if you so wish. So if you want a specific size dashed line, you can create it. The wrench. Now this is how you're going to be cutting something out. So you have the style. You can, independent of what you have on your design, you can choose to cut out a blackout or a shadow or whatever. You can weld things temporarily. If you have this clicked, the items on your mat will be welded together for the cut, but they're not altered in your actual file. It's solely for the cut that you're doing at the moment. Then you have clipping, which allows you to do clipping of patterns and such like. Cut line, this is on cut. Now, there are different types of cut lines that you can have depending on the cutter that you are using. In the silver bullet, I could cut, I could draw. We've got print and cut, cut only. We have print and cut, print only. Colour layer alignment is something used normally with cutting vinyls, where you need to layer up different colours of vinyls. So that's that one, and we have different presets, which, because the silver bullet could be controlled by the software, it would allow me to set different pressure settings for it. Again, this depends on the machine that you have. Then we have the text, pretty self-explanatory. Or the fonts that you have on your computer will be accessed by the program. So if you've got a load of fonts, they're already in here. You don't have to worry about it. This is the layer tab. So the more layers you have, the more this will be filled. So if I put a shape in here, for example, you can see that I now have a shape in it. And here we have a little help button. So this gives you a very brief description of certain things that you might want help on. Okay, so let's put that back to layers. Then you have the adding a layer folder, so you can manually add a layer if you need to, and you have the dustbin. You can delete layers. And up here you've got a tiny little bit here, and you've got various layer options here. So removing empty layers, if you've got any empty layers in there, is quite a handy one to have. On here you've got the eyeball, which means your layer is visible. If you check it, your layer is no longer visible. And on this one here, you got the lock, so you can either lock something or unlock it. You have pages down here. So in Shortcuts a lot, you can add new pages to your document. If you save it in SCAL format, then it will save as the complete document. If you are saving in something like SVG, you have to save it by page. Up here we have our name for our document, if you've bothered to name it and you've opened it, and then you can click on here for a new project and it will give you the options to do that. Okay, that's it for the very first video. What I suggest you do is open it up, have a play, get to know some of the controls, and I'll see you for the next one. Take care.